Just because you stop a problem doesn't mean you've changed the problem. A lot of times dogs will redirect to something else. So we want to be careful when we're looking for a trainer how they are advertising themselves. Welcome to this episode of Dog Leads. I'm Steve Bishop, certified dog trainer. If you'd like help implementing anything I talk about today or any of the other episodes, you can email me at bishopsgatetraining@gmail.com. I've been seeing a lot of advertisements for dog trainers on the internet just because of the way my algorithm has been set up with what I do view. And I see a lot of things that I would be very skeptical of in these advertisements. Before we start, I did want to mention, obviously, I'm in a different location. My family and I are on vacation in Washington, D.C., visiting my brothers and their respective families. So I kind of put off recording this episode until we got here, which was my mistake. But so it's going to look a little bit different this week. So the first thing we want to be careful of when we look for a trainer is the guarantee. You cannot guarantee your methods because there are just so many unknown variables. One of those would be we don't know how the dog is going to react to the training. So a lot of times I've talked about in a previous episode, what may work for one dog may not work for another dog. So the sit is the example I used. Ideally, how that works is we lure the dog into position. The hand comes up, the dog follows the treat in the hand, and then once their head is up, they have that seesaw motion, the back end goes down a little bit, and then we bring the hand straight over their head. The idea being as they follow the treat going over their head, they're going to go into that full sit position. Some dogs just will not do that for me. So another method would be to kind of push in towards the dog. We're not actually pushing the dog, but we're moving the treat towards them. So as they look down, they're going to back up a little bit, but hits the floor. The point being there's several methods that you can use, and I cannot guarantee one is going to work for every dog. The other variable is we don't know if the people are going to practice the behaviors with their dog when we're not there. A good example of that is when I worked for a daycare, we did board and train, and I was the trainer. I took this dog out, very smart dog, very receptive, responded really well to the training. But when the person came to pick them up, I said, hey, we need to sit down for about an hour or so I can go over what I taught the dog and how we get the dog to respond. Yeah, I told her it was kind of like, I've taught your dog French, now I need to teach you French so that you can communicate. And she never would do it. So I imagine the dog was still responding the same way in the home as he was before I worked with him. So we don't have that guarantee that the people are going to do the work that they need to do on top of it. So we just can't guarantee that the dog is going to respond. The other problem I see with this, when you see guarantee, usually it's reliant on pain or aversion. So the dog is avoiding whatever it is, and it is a change in the behavior, but again, at what cost? And I've talked about this in several episodes, so I won't go too far into it. But imagine you're afraid of snakes, and somebody takes and puts you in a snake pit to get you over your fear. What happens is it's called flooding. What happens is you get so fearful, but you cannot do anything, so you don't do anything. And it's the same thing with our dogs. If they're responding to that pain, they're going to stop that behavior because they want to avoid the pain, but they still have that desire, chewing if their teeth are hurting, peeing in the house because they're not being taken out often enough, those types of things. Another thing you want to be careful of, and I talk about this in episode 7, is you want to avoid things like pack leader, alpha, hierarchy, dominance. I don't want to go too far in this because I have talked about it, but I'll leave a link to that episode in the description. But something like alpha is the dog that gets the resources most often, but it's not because they're being assertive. It's because the other dog or dogs or person is acquiescing. They're allowing that dog to have whatever resource it happens to be. So a good example of that, say somebody comes up and punches me in the face. Who's dominant? Well, it depends on what I do. I may go and haul off and hit them back, and they're like, oh, that guy can punch harder than me, I'm out. but it's that relationship. It's not one person doing one thing, or one dog in this case doing one thing. It's how the other individual responds and how that all plays out. It's an aspect of a relationship, not a personality trait. So we want to avoid those types of things. The whole pack animal thing, I've talked about that before. Dogs are scavengers, so they don't need to form these packs. And even with the litters, the male dog, once they have intercourse with the female, they're gone. They don't stay and raise the puppies like other animals do their young. So they're not pack animals. They do come together in social groups, but those don't usually last very long, or are not persistent. So we want to avoid terms like pack leader and hierarchy dominance, those types of things. Another thing we see a lot is positive equals cookie pusher. And in reality, what it is positive equals understanding the science behind behavior. So if something good happens every time I participate in an activity, I'm more likely to do that more often. The behavior predicts something good. If you're at work, somebody comes up to you and asks you to do a project, even though you're not crazy about doing that project, you know it predicts something good, which is your paycheck at the end of the pay period, or a bonus, or overtime, something like that. So you're more likely to do that behavior, even though it's not your favorite thing. And it's understanding that science behind those reinforcers that trainers should be using, hopefully are using. I've mentioned before, Duncan loved tennis balls, and I would use those in training as often as I could where it was practical. So it doesn't necessarily have to be food or a cookie. It can be anything the dog is willing to work for. We want to make that behavior predict something good, something that the dog desires. Something that kind of ebbs and flows, and I'm seeing a lot more of them lately, just the stuff that I'm getting or seeing, is what's called balance trainers. Oh, you got to use everything in your toolbox. Well, yes, that's true to a point, but it's excusing aversive training methods. Again, I've talked about if the dog enjoys doing something, they're a lot more likely to do it again. They're going to learn it a lot faster, and it's going to be a lot more reliable. If you're using these aversive tools, it's just saying, I am an incompetent trainer and I do not understand behavior enough to teach this without suppressing behavior. A good example of this that I was thinking of, I used to work at a place we would get guys from, it was called the pre-release center. It was guys that were in jail. They were about to get out and they could leave for the day and work a job so that they could make money, so that when they were actually released, they would have a little bit of money to fall back on to get an apartment and a car or whatever, things that they needed to reintegrate back into life. We had this one guy that was in jail for, he had stolen a car, was drunk, and he went to jail for it. So he got out, he was finally released, and we hired him on full time. And to avoid drinking the alcohol, he would drink mouthwash all day. Once we figured this out, he was gone, but I mean, his breath smelled really good. But the point being, he was getting that reinforcer any way he could. So we stopped the behavior, putting him in jail, but he found another way to get that he wanted. So we actually want to change that behavior using science-based methods that we know work and not just suppress it. Another thing that I really hate, a television trainer who is actually an actor more than he is a trainer, you hear him say the dog is calm and submissive. Going back to that example, putting you in the snake pit, the dog is not calm and submissive. The dog is flooded and he is afraid to do anything. One of the problems with this is the dog may not exhibit that behavior in front of the person, the trainer, whomever, but once that person is gone, they may revert back to it. So we haven't taught the dog anything how to deal with that behavior or how to change it. And again, going back to this television actor that does dog training, there's a specific episode where he got bitten and, oh, we solved everything and it's great and wonderful, but the people had to sign an NDA. It eventually came out that the dog's behavior was not any better and just continued, even though they were doing everything that was recommended by this so-called trainer. A lot of people have adopted this idea of energy, which goes back to the same trainer that I was talking about. And the problem with that is it can be anything. You cannot define it. It's one of those situations, in my opinion, that if you cannot explain it to a 4-year-old so that they understand it, you don't truly understand it either. It kind of conflates aggression, the person being aggressive with the dog, as being assertive. And if you're not assertive enough, then you're the problem, not the dog. Or what's actually happening is it shifts the blame to the owner instead of the training method. So we want to look at what we're actually trying to achieve. If we're trying to change that emotional state, it's not enough just to get the dog not to do anything. We've got to change their perception or the reinforcement of that behavior. I will leave a link to the episode Finding a Dog Trainer, which kind of could be a companion episode to this one, talking about things to look for in a trainer. And then, like I said, I'll leave a link to the episode about dominance, so you can watch those also if you want a little more information. And as always, if you want more information, you want me to dive into any of the aspects of this episode more, you can always let me know, and I'm happy to put something together that goes a little more in depth. Thank you for joining me today. If you found today's conversation helpful, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share it with a friend. It truly helps the podcast grow. If you have questions, a topic suggestion, or you want to schedule a private training session, leave a comment or email me at bishopsgatetraining@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you back here next week. Awesome sauce.